am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interviewed Tom Hood, the CEO and president of Maryland Society of CPAs, as well as the Business Learning Institute. Tom is one of the most influential leaders in the accounting profession. In 2018, he was named the second most influential person in accounting for the 6th year by Accounting Today magazine, and he was one of the first 5 thought leaders inducted into the Accounting Hall of Fame by CPA Practice Advisor. Tom is on a mission to help CPAs, finance, and accounting professionals thrive in times of exponential change. He firmly believes that we got us here won't get us there as the profession faces unprecedented changes and opportunities. During my interview with Tom, he shares his journey from wanting to be in law enforcement to eventually leading one of the largest CPA societies in the USA. Learn about his approach to innovation, culture, and helping professionals be future ready. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. Today, I am with Tom Hood from the Maryland Society. And welcome, Tom. Do you want to give a little bit of a background to everyone?
Sure. It's great to be here, Amy, by the way. And hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm Tom Hood. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Association of CPAs and the Business Learning Institute. I am a CPA as well as a CITP and a CGMA. And I've known Amy, we've known each other for a decent while now, from your days way back in Zero and beyond. So it's great to be here with you.
Well, glad to have you on because I know you'll always have good stories. Now, and we've talked a little bit before, but I'd love to get back in your background of where you grew up and kind of what your parents did and how your background was before ever entering into the accounting profession or thinking of it.
All right, sure. Be careful what you ask for.
Okay.
But, so interesting enough, I am now just probably 7 or 8 miles from where I grew up. My wife and I moved down to Baltimore City. So we're now back to the city.
Okay.
Both of us actually grew up in Baltimore City. She was an East Side girl and I was a West Side guy. But yeah, so I grew up in the edges of Baltimore City. Now I'm like right in the downtown area. Yeah, my dad was a Baltimore City police officer.
Oh, okay.
And my mom was of all things way back, she was a data entry person at it was like a auto parts store. So yeah, she was doing like key punching back in the day.
Wow.
So that's where I guess I got like a little bit of my IT curiosity from living with her all these times. She still has IBM punch cards, as a matter of fact, that she takes notes on in her in her apartment. But yeah, so when I was graduating, I mean, I was always curious about what my dad was doing as a police officer, helping people, doing the community police thing. Interesting enough, it's a bit of deja vu because he was back during the 60s when there were massive riots and protests, which are kind of coming full circle right now.
How did you feel when your dad was involved with all that? Was that scary?
Well, yeah, my wife. So I was like in 1st grade, but my mom was, petrified every time he'd walk out the door. He was in a really tough spot in Baltimore City, one where there was just a lot of activity, and but he kept his calm through it and made it through all that really well, helping that community. So that got me curious about law enforcement. So they were kind of hoping I was going to go to college. I went to a kind of a college prep school. So I thought, well, what could I do in law enforcement? But that would be more like with a college degree. So I had this crazy idea that I wanted to be an FBI agent.
I did too.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I mean, back in those days, there were two primary ways of becoming an FBI agent. One was law,
One was
go
white
through
collar.
law school, and the other one was accounting. So law school is a heck of a lot cheaper when you're paying your way through school like I was doing.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I better go with the shorter one, and that was accounting.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I when I graduated, I had an opportunity here to work with the FBI on white collar crime. So when I looked more into it, I really wanted to do it. That was the hardest job to not finish out the process. But you were gonna get pulled, like if they were shorthanded on bank robberies or other types of stuff. And I was like, if you're not doing that every day, how like good would you be in the field? You know, like even if you're trained, it's different, you know, when you're used to the issues.
Right. Yeah, especially when you're getting into those kind of issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I did an internship with Baltimore City Police while I was going to school in college. So I did. It was like a junior police thing that they did, and so that was like a little mini start. Then as I started, so
What
I
did
got
you
into
do
it.
there?
It was really just like desk work. They put you in the police headquarters and had you like filing things and stuff like that. But at least got me exposed, right? And so then when I started researching the FBI, when I got into college, so I was going to night school. I started out in Hopkins, and then I transferred later to Loyola.
Okay.
And so then when I started looking into the FBI, went visit the FBI offices and talked to them, all of a sudden I realized that you had to have 20/20 eyesight uncorrected back in those days.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I wore contacts. So I'm like, man, now my dream has been shattered. Like I can't be an FBI agent. Looking back now, I don't know that I want to be an FBI agent given all the stuff that's going on there too.
Right?
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So then I'm in school doing my accounting, and I'm like, well, I guess I got to get a job as an accountant now. I don't even know what an accountant is. So that's what I did.
That's funny. Did you enjoy being around law enforcement? Like, was that disappointing to?
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, it was like that was one of the things I really, really wanted to do. So then I'm like, okay, I gotta make a living. I mean, when I'm going to get this degree, it's gotta pay the bills. And in those days, so again, I'm going to school at night, so I needed a day job. So I got a job in a finance company as a accountant. And in those days, we were, if you can believe it, hand posting general ledgers with a fountain pen. It was.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I mean, it was crazy. And then
you sound like you're like Ben Franklin. Right
it feels like it was like Ben Franklin. Like you had this fountain pen, and then so every day it was me on the general ledger side, and there was a cash receipts lady who I'll never forget. Her name was Helen. And so every day she would be adding up all the cash receipts. I would be getting the journal entries from the different departments where the cash was going in, right? And we had to balance or we couldn't go home. So she's over there with these, hand calculators, and she was like amazingly fast. It's like, and the tape is spitting out the tape. And I'm like writing my stuff down. All of a sudden we'd be like, oh, we're out. And then it was like, how do we find that? So it was kind of neat because we were always, A, being very careful about our quality, but B, when we messed up, we had to really dig in and investigate, like, what was that going on? So it was kind of a fun time.
Team-oriented versus individual.
Yeah. And it was a good group of folks in there. And my boss at that time was a CPA, and he got me exposed to the CPA profession, said, really, you need to get your CPA if you're going to do this. And then got me involved in the Maryland Association of CPAs. So from then, as I moved into new jobs, they always got me involved in the association. So that was kind of neat. So I enjoyed that part of it.
So what kind of roles did you do with the Maryland Society when you started out?
Well, so you'll love this too. So this goes back to probably to that joint, my dad in law enforcement, my mom in data entry. I always wanted to find ways of doing stuff easier. I'm like, there's got to be a better way than doing all this manual work that I was doing.
With a fountain pen.
With a fountain pen. So
at least use a pencil.
Right. So interesting enough, when we got from as we moved through and stuff started to get automated, when I went to my next job, which at an architecture firm, they were all starting to do computer-aided design on these big mini computers.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were word processors where they typed in all the big requirements and the standards and all that stuff. So there, when you started looking at those word processors, VisiCalc was invented. Now, many people listening today won't have any clue what that is. It was Excel in the
It was pre-Lotus 1-2-3.
Pre-Lotus, pre-Lotus 1-2-3. So VisiCalc, it had 64 rows and 64 columns. That was it. And but we could do these contract calculations that we were doing on those big 14-column pads, and that was like a game changer. So that was when we started learning about doing that. So in the association, other CPAs were all playing around with this stuff, and we started the EDWP committee, Electronic Data and Word Processing. You can believe that. Because back in those days, the only way you got access to like apps like VisiCalc or what would become Lotus 1-2-3 was it was in a word processing environment.
Oh,
so they weren't PCs back then, right? They were mini computers like Wang and DEC and IBM and those kind of things. So that's what we did. So our job was to find ways for CPAs to understand this new technology. And soon after that, we moved into the PC era. So our job in the association as a volunteer, we had one of the first computer labs. It was like us in Georgia, Colorado. We actually had a lab because at that time when they went and bought computers, you were buying them from I don't even know what the stores were called back then, like CompUSA and those kind. They had training at the store. Like, how do you use these PCs, right? And that's when Lotus, those were coming out. But CPAs don't like to look stupid.
Right.
So they didn't want to be sitting in a class with potential clients where they don't even know how to turn the thing on, right? So it's like a brand. So we said if we could buy them as the association and run training, CPAs could be in one community, learn how to do it in a safe environment and start learning the stuff. And that's what we did. So that really got me hooked on tech and technology because it was game changing.
Yeah, isn't that interesting, that psyche too, even then, of trying new things and being concerned you're not the expert at it?
Yeah, same stuff, right? We see today now. And a degree of laziness, like I just wanted to do, like I said,
the way I've always done it. I want my fountain pen.
Exactly. I was ready to give that out right away. So
yeah. So through that committee, did you find a role at Maryland Society, or how?
So that committee led to board of directors appointments. I was on the board of directors pretty early on. I was probably one of the younger ones. And I won like committee chair of the year, and because we were doing important stuff, right? That was really catching at the time. And then it would lead to getting on the executive committee there. So I became the treasurer. I got some great mentoring though. I mean, the thing that's true, it's still true to this day, but being surrounded by other professionals who were really like some of the best in the field was just an amazing experience. So I got on the base of the board of directors, went to the executive committee, became the chair of the association. This is back in like 93, 94. And so I knew the executive director, I knew all the staff. Some of our key team members like Jackie Brown are still with us today. So the executive director came to me, now I'm in highway construction, right? So I'm in highway construction now for about 10 years. We went through this severe downturn and ultimately had to sell our company. As CFO, I was instrumental in trying to figure out the deal and all those kind of things. But the company that bought us had a caustic culture. I mean, it kind of like almost forced us into bankruptcy. It was a very like hostile private company acquisition. I had no taste for moving into this big foreign conglomerate that didn't treat people right. So I'm like, I'm going to look for another job. And the executive director was retiring. And she goes, we're putting on a search committee. You might want to throw your resume in. So they had a national search committee. Because in highway construction, we had to like put asphalt plants around, right, and get permits. So in most businesses, whatever doesn't relate to sales or operations goes to the CFO.
Right.
So I had like HR, I had IT. So then we're permitting a plant in a neighborhood that didn't want us. So now I'm in charge of community relations and legislative. So, because they were putting in laws to try to stop us, right? That was
Right.
kind of the craziness. Anyhow, so I had that background, which was like perfect for running an association. So I said, as long as you're going to run it like a business and we can start to think about how we add value and do those kind of things. And I got lucky, and here I've been for 23 years.
Wow. Wow. That's interesting. So, I mean, knowing you and all the things that you bring to the society and to the profession at large. So how do you stay excited about it? Because you're always ready to kind of push the next thing, but for 23 years in the same job.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because the job has allowed me to do things like trying to help the profession move into the future, right? So if your job is helping the profession be future ready and helping it to transform, that means it's never done. So
Right.
the way it keeps, so interesting, the first day of my job was actually at a national meeting with the AICPA shortly after Barry took the helm.
Okay.
And all the state CPA societies. And so it's literally my first paid day was at this national meeting. And I remember like it was yesterday because they announced this CPA Vision Project. And one of my lifelong friends, Jeannie Patton from Utah, she was like initially picked to help the Institute put this together while she was executive in Utah. And so Barry's explaining this project. Bob Mednick, Arthur Anderson partner, was the chair at the time, and he was like talking about this thing. And they started this project that would be all over the country running these forums, and each state would have their role if they wanted to help run them interstate. And so I'm like, man, how could I, for going into a new job, being able to sit with members in your state and create forums about the future?
Right.
Wow, couldn't get any better, right? So I'm like, yeah, sign me up. Jeannie Patton quickly grabbed me as this new kid on the block and said, all right, we need you to help. So she asked me to help her kind of co-lead it. Ultimately, she would hand it off to me as she moved out of it. And so then we ran these forums all over the state, got all kinds of great input from members about what they thought about the future in 2011. This is 1998.
Mm-hmm.
So they looked out, 13, 14 years. Interesting enough that the things that came out of that are what led us to start our Business Learning Institute.
Okay.
Because we basically crowdsourced the future of the profession.
Right.
Like to this day, Amy, no one knows that no other profession's ever done this. Our profession's done it now twice formally, and we just did it again with the CPA Convene platform. So, so that's what keeps me interested when we can sit down and get CPAs to think about, talk about the future, and help co-create it. That's exciting.
Yeah, and that's really the premise of innovation, period. Even if you're doing it in your business or firm or whatever you do for a living, when you try to do it alone, it's a much harder change management process than when you build relationships along the way and get feedback. Yes. So what have you learned from that?
Well, I think I learned that the profession, if you CPAs are really smart people, which I love. Mm-hmm. And if you give them the background and context, they can create some pretty powerful stuff. So I think that power of the crowd, right? I call it the wisdom of the crowd thing. That was critical during that. And that was probably one of my biggest learnings. So anytime I can leverage or do that, and it's shown up in all of the ways we try to do learning and development, right? It's all about whether it's sticky notes or polls. It's a very important to get the people talking and expressing their ideas, because ideas link and leverage and can turn into really powerful stuff. And so the magic of teaching future CPAs and current CPAs how to do that, we just love doing that. That to me is truly exciting. I think the other thing is the profession is not as, some say we're not that creative. Some say we won't ever be able to get to some of these, what we call future ready skills, strategic thinking and those kind of things. I think that's not true. I think I've learned that, again, with the right context, giving them, here's what we know about the future, or some reports or things like that, they can, once they get it, they can go, okay, let me imagine what else I can do. So to me, that's the probably biggest thing I learned, those two things, power of the crowd and the ability to do some strategic thinking.
How do you turn that into action? Because you can do the thinking, you can come up with the ideas, but I think in a lot of places that try to do innovation, it stays there.
Yeah, I think, and we're actually doing a lot of work with innovation right now with firms. I mean, we're using the work, so we're doing the work with Dan Burris. I know you've been familiar with some of that, the whole idea of being anticipatory. So that's the kind of core skill set. The innovation agenda is, we've just finished developing a framework that CPAs can actually use. What CPAs need is they need structure.
The checklist.
I used to be critical of that, and now I've started to appreciate it. You're right, they do. So if you give them a frame, right, and not necessarily every step filled in, but if you give them structure, they can fill it in. And that's what we've done for years in our strat planning practice, using sticky notes, and we had big wall templates, those kind of things. So what you need, it's like we need cognitive spreadsheets. That's what they need, Amy, to do that kind of work, because give a CPA an Excel spreadsheet and a problem, and they can go to town on it. So what we've learned is putting innovation in a framework of, here's like some rows and columns that give it structure. Now they go, oh, I could create a innovation inventory. Then I can take those most important things, top 5, whatever, and then I can start, how do I plan how to execute that? Anyhow, that's what we're starting to play with right now, because I think that's what they're all looking for. They didn't used to think they had to innovate because they really didn't have to. Things weren't moving that fast. Right,
exactly. Kind of want to back up a little, because, if you look at your journey, it's not a typical career path. I think it's an important thing to highlight, because I just had this conversation today about, there's a lot of young professionals that come into the profession and immediately get turned off. I mean, I will say, I don't think it's just accounting. I mean, accounting is what we know, right? But I have a 19-year-old. I see him struggling, going from like, I'm about to become an adult. I am an adult, but I am like, am I willing to give up my, so, so I've been in a lot of discussions with him about it, but I've talked to a lot of young professionals through speaking engagements and other things. And there's a perspective of like, wherever you come in, let's say you start as an auditor, you see that one path, and then you think that's what the career is, and give up because you're like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this my whole life, without realizing that there's these other opportunities out there. And I know you work with a lot of young professionals and get them excited. And I think with your background and also your experience with that, I think it's an important thing to highlight in your story of what you do to keep people excited about the profession when, there's jobs you have that you just don't enjoy sometimes, but how do you not give up on all the expertise and experience that you have leading up to that?
Yeah, I think and I know there's a lot of people in our profession that are first generation college grads, right? That I was the first in my family to go to college, did it on my own, and did it at night so I could get a job. So that helped. I mean, if you're hungry, you're not necessarily going to get as bored, right? Because you're like, I got to get food on the table and all those great things. I think the other part was, though, I was never afraid to say if I felt like I wasn't growing in my skills or in what I was learning. That's usually what triggered the next move. And when I was younger, I was less likely to talk to my employer proactively. I would often start to think about, I better just go look, because I didn't see anything obvious in front.
Right.
But in my early career, so I couldn't go into public accounting back then because when you went to night school, the public accounting firms did not want you once you had experience. So I had experience as an accounting clerk, as an accountant. I had like
That's so funny.
I had 2 or 3 years experience.
They wanted to train you their way.
Yeah, it's like they want you molded in their image.
Yeah.
So I never went to public accounting. I stayed in corporate my whole time, although I was in finance company. Then I went to a printer publisher, architecture, highway construction, and then the association. So, 4 or 5 jobs in that first probably 10 years. So I think the key is to keep learning about yourself. Like, what is it that you liked?
Mm-hmm.
What didn't you like? So that's critical. And then I think it's just, you have to be curious. Like that was kind of the big thing. And I wanted growth and I wanted new roles and new responsibilities. I'll tell you the other thing though, is hanging out with the other CPAs at the association, having the network I did with public accounting, all the other people in business and industry, that was huge. Now, it's not the same today as it was back then because you had to go to these committee meetings and you were constantly out doing that stuff. But I think there are ways where people can get connected, and it's those relationships outside your work. I think today, most of the firms I know, everyone's staying connected to their work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think that's where you get very myopic. When we have our leadership academy, we bring in CPAs, business and industry, public accounting, different all over the place. They all love learning about what each other's doing. And I think that's what's missing, Amy. If they stay only connected to the world they know, even in the corporate side, they're missing out on this world of this profession. Because this whole pandemic has put an exclamation mark on how important accounting and tax is to the economy.
Yes.
In every business, right?
And not just that, but understanding it.
Yeah, exactly. Understanding at a deep level.
And like where there's been so much time and, we're out speaking and people are like, oh, I'm afraid technology is going to take my job. If there's ever a time that's been proven more that technology can't take your job, it's if you don't learn how to be proactive and give advice, because that's what people are hungry for their accountant right now, but they need an accountant that's going to be proactive and help them.
Absolutely. And a lot of our profession is rising to that occasion, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had to, right? Because they were heads down doing tax return. All of a sudden someone took a big switch and flipped off the whole daggone economy and said, you need to help these companies survive. So you better figure out cash flow and PPP and EIDL and every other alphabet soup. But that's the cool part, is like what was hidden behind spreadsheets and in the back room, here comes Tom the accountant again. Instead is like, oh my God, Tom, Amy, I need you to come help me figure out my business. I got to survive.
Right.
Different conversation.
And I would also say to some of the things that you're talking about to employers and leaders, that if you try to hold on too hard and not allow people to network and learn what others are doing, thinking they'll leave you.
Well said. They'll leave you.
So, it's true. And it's important to give them, like, your employer gave you the push, right, to get involved with these things, which only help their business. But because of that, you felt very loyal to them for giving you the opportunity of learning and growth. So I think too many times we try to hold on versus when we expand someone's perspective and horizons, that can only help our own relationship and business.
We've done the AICPA Leadership Academy now. I think we're on year 12. We've done our own in Maryland. We've done it for several other states. So I've been working with these, young professional emerging leaders for almost 2 decades here. And every time they're in together, they're never sitting there talking about what's better and I want to get a job there. They're not doing that. They're saying, what are you doing, Amy? And then we go, oh, how do you do that? And it's because there's all these nuances that they bring to the table. So you're right.
Yeah.
And in the old days, Amy, this is where I think we've got a challenge, because I was grabbed by my boss and took me to a Maryland Association.
Right.
He said, you're going to join the MACPA and AICPA. They don't do that anymore.
Right.
They're all afraid, like, oh my God, if if they meet another CPA from another company or firm, they're going to go want to work there. It's like, no, it's not that way.
Well, and if you have the right culture, no one would want to leave you. You know, if you have the right technology in place, if you have the right openness. And I think too, just on that, there is a generational difference, right? That, you know, the old way of networking was, you know, going to those events, which is still there
Right.
if you're good at that.
Yes.
But if you find that you've got staff that are better on social media, or better writers, or better, you know, where maybe you're not as aware of something, put them on it.
Yeah.
Like push them to do that, you know, so like it doesn't have to be a one size fit all. That will get them excited about working for you because it expands their skill set.
Yeah, and that's the secret, right? Is you got to, you know, push them and give them some new ways of finding things that they can do well, find their superpower.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, look at your kind of your pathway, and, you know, becoming a national, international thought leader, and because you're speaking and writing and doing some really cool stuff, right? It's
yeah. Well, and you know, and those things are not, you know, I think when people look at different people's careers, you think, you know, you could target that. I wasn't targeting it.
exactly.
You weren't targeting that. You know, I think what it is as a person, when we come back to the breaking beliefs theme of this podcast, is breaking your belief of what a career pathway is.
I love that.
It's being more open to that opportunity looks good. I want to learn that.
Right.
Not like what that gets me, what title that gets me. You know, it's more like that just expanded my skill set, and I'm going to learn something else that might take me in another direction, but not being too narrow focused of thinking there's only one path.
Right.
Or that you're not ready. Because I know both of us, I mean, even in your story, opportunities come along where you're like, well, I've never done that before. I'm going to go learn it.
It's true. I think, you know, and to this day, I love to take on things that I don't know how to do, I'm not great at, and I figure it out, right? And that's how I learn a lot. I mean, that's the beauty. Like, yeah, it's like, can you talk about this? Sure, I can talk about it.
I'll figure it out.
Little 4 books and start reading and you know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But that's what I think. You just hit on a really big point, right? Not one of these jobs did I ever set my sights on or know what the heck it was. It was, it was like a door would open and it'd be like, okay, I think I'm gonna go through that door. And then after you get through that door and learn a lot and got good at it, then another door would open. But you're not quite sure
where it's leading.
I think it was Steve Jobs that said, you can't connect the dots looking forward.
Yes.
You can only connect them in hindsight. And the reality is I could sit now as you walk me through my career path, I could see how that led to this, to that, but none of it was ahead of me. I couldn't say that.
Right.
And it was a very crooked path. It was not straight line.
Right.
So I think that's a mistake. Everyone thinks I got to know what I need to do for the rest of my life. I want to be a tax accountant. I want to be the, you know, audit professional. It's like, no, don't. Learn as much as you can and find the things that you enjoy. Keep learning about yourself. That's another thing I think you help people do, because it's learning about your strengths and your weaknesses. What do you like? What don't you like? And then be curious and just try some different things. There's too many options in this profession. You could work for, like, down the street here's Under Armour, across the harbor's Domino Sugar.
Right.
CPA firms, from sole practitioners to, you know, Big Four. It's all there. Nonprofits, government, they all need good CPAs.
And nothing has to be forever. It's,
exactly.
You know, so it's, you know, so I just, you know, with, you know, you've got such a great background, but also just that experience with the younger generation. And I think whatever generation you're in, especially in these times, it's really important to break the norms so that you can keep exciting people to say, you know, there's no retirement if there's no one behind you.
Right.
So you have to be open to new ideas. And I love that you have that framework and, you know, for people to go through as well, because I think, you know, not everybody, and nor should it be that everyone thinks the same.
Right.
And so if you're a structured person and you don't like the unknown, then that's the right, there's nothing wrong with that. But
Right.
it's no, like you said, knowing yourself and knowing what you're good at and what you need in order to succeed and asking for those things, or as a leader, being open to the things
Yeah.
people need.
Spot on. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing I would add that I think if I had one big piece of advice for young people, it would be leaders are readers. And when I look across our profession, and I know we've got all the CPE mentality and we take our 80 hours every 2 years,
Right. More than
but
that.
like,
Mm-hmm.
when's the last time you read a book, a business book, or new business models, or about technology, or about the future? So, and what are you doing for like snacks? Are you reading some magazines, Fast Company or Wired magazine or
Right.
Harvard Business Review? So that's what I would say, because I see a lot of young professionals who just aren't worldly in a business learning sense.
Yeah.
And that's true no matter where they are. So I think that's the thing, is like, I know many of them are maybe too much. I got too many standards I've had to read, but you need to read some of those, classics like Tom Peters and Drucker, or some of the newer people like Burris and Simon Sinek and all those guys.
Right.
You just got to be, you should be reading probably at least a dozen books a year.
Yeah. And beyond, like you said, beyond just your profession, it's learning the entrepreneurial side, the business side, the cultural side, like all those things that
Yeah.
help you. So I love that advice. Very good. So one thing I'd like to do is ask you some quick fire questions
All right.
as we end. So pick a category: family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Let's do family and friends.
Okay. So things or actions that I don't have that I want.
Don't have that I want. I would kind of like to have a boat, as long as I didn't have to maintain it.
Fair enough. Things or actions that I do have that I want with my family and friends.
We have 3 boys who are almost all married. The last one's getting married. So just the fact of getting our family together with their spouses or fiance, and having a great meal, that's something that we do a bit of and love to do.
Oh, that's nice.
And
Yeah. And you take the best pictures of finding the best restaurants. So if you want to follow him for that. Things or actions I don't have that I don't want with my family and friends.
Actions that I don't have that I don't want. So we don't have like infighting that you see sometimes with siblings and things like
Yeah.
that. We don't have that, and
That's
I
great.
don't want it. So we try to keep
No.
that going good.
And last one, things or actions that I do have that I don't want with my family and friends.
Actions that I do have that I don't want. I would say, because of all the busy world, that's, of course, the COVID thing made it even worse, but I don't get to see them as much as I'd like to. That's what
Yeah.
I like to have more of, but don't have enough of.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard as they get older and start their own
Very
families.
hard.
And,
They've got
yeah.
their own lives, and then it's doubled up with it, the spouse and all.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
although we've actually been doing good with like Zoom even through this coronavirus. So we've had
Oh, well, that's nice.
family things and special occasions. So
Yeah. Cool. So anything that you want to make sure that we didn't cover, or as a takeaway from your story?
I think, I mean, other than I think be curious and don't be afraid to look for new opportunity and keep learning, would be the big one. I think that's it. It's like, you just got to keep, for me, it was seeking opportunities to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Don't stop doing that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. As always, it's always a pleasure.
It was awesome to be on here with you. It's good to see you and talk to you again.
Exactly. All right. Thank you.
All right, Amy. Thank you.
Now for our mindful moments during my interview with Tom Hood, where we talked about his beginnings as in Baltimore City with his family, where his dad was a police officer and his mom was a data entry person at an auto parts store, and how that really got him curious about going into law enforcement himself, but also liking the data entry and technology side that really shaped the beginnings of his career. I thought it was really interesting when we talk about forks in the road of what pivots a career when he found out that he didn't have 2020 vision, and that was a requirement to go into the FBI at the time. And so that really pivoted his path in what he was going to do and where he was going to go to start out, which he started in a police department as well, doing the accounting and finance, which led him to really get his first finance job as he was going to school at night. And I think this is really important where we talk about mentors, and his first mentor being his first boss that not only got him involved early on and getting him experience in the finance area, but also getting him involved to the CPA profession and networking with others. And that really led to opportunities for Tom throughout his career as he was really realizing how much technology can transform the work that we all do and how he could be a part of it. And starting out really being on that committee where they were trying to figure out how can they get to electronic data word processing, which was so interesting. But moving from manual work with the fountain pen to moving to technology and starting to automate the work and take that work down. And with that, I think it's really important to pause on that because of how many times the profession has had to pivot. So it will really be important that when we think about change, that it's when we look backward, we see how many times we have changed in the past and thrived. Rather than being fearful of what the future looks like, sometimes it's good to step back and think about how many times you have already changed in your career or have had to learn new things so that you could offer new services or be able to grow in your career. And so when we talked about his career really changing based on the different committees that he did and taking on more responsibility with the Maryland Society till there was an available opening as an executive director, this really led to that conversation of how important it is to network outside of the place that you work and really getting to know what other people do as well so that you can expand your horizons. And know that there are lots of different opportunities to take, no matter what your career is, wherever you start. You may think you know what the path is, but as you go further into your career, get more responsibility, get more expertise, what happens is opportunities come your way that you don't even realize that are going to happen. And you can't predict that they're going to happen as well. And so when he quoted that Steve Jobs quote, which I think is really important that we think about, is that you cannot connect the dots looking forward, only looking backward. That when we try to connect the dots, that's when we go wrong, right? When we try to force the future, instead of really looking at things that are interesting to us, that we can be curious about, and we can get involved in that makes us excited. So maybe that's not the current thing that we are doing, but it's by getting involved in other things and opening our eyes to trends and opportunities or initiatives that where people need collaboration and help that can really change our own future without even intending for that to happen. So a big theme in this was staying curious, but also to keep learning. Not just learning the things that you know, but expanding yourself outside of your world, whether it's meeting new people, reading books, reading magazines, reading online articles, blogs, getting involved in activities that maybe aren't exactly the norm that you would necessarily get into for the career that you have, opens your eyes to be able to try new things, because you never know if a door is going to open. And it's when we least expect it, those doors open. And so really, as we move forward from this conversation, I think the most important thing to get across is to not be afraid of the future. That what's important is that we will always rise up to the next thing as long as we are open to learning and we continue to be curious. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.